Is Joyce there?
Yes, she is.
Anybody else?
Uh, Someone's trying to connect.
All right, I'll be there in a few.
So has everybody voted?
Yes, yes. We did the mail thing and brought it to town hall.
Good.
Did you like the pictures?
I just
I
missed.
do like your pictures.
The garden, whatever they, what was it? A tree and flowers, and then the other one, that last flower is for you personally.
Well, thank you. But this is the picture
Oh,
Claire's talking about.
I love it. Now
I
we
made
can
it with
embroider
magic
that.
marker.
I'm sorry, Claire, what were you saying?
I did it with magic marker. You could do anything with them.
That's right. That's right.
I was just doodling, and I said, well, whatever which way it comes out, it comes out. And then if it doesn't come out right, then I'll do something else.
Oh, I think
I
it's
got a lot of my nervousness out of me.
so this is the picture she sent me. I've been after her to make a tree and didn't work. So I asked her to design one, and then I would make it into a quilt block for our community quilt. So the first thing I did was I started essentially tracing it, but blocking it, thinking in terms of the paper piecing we've been doing and trying to make a paper piecing pattern out of her design. So I have to sort of stylize it a little bit. And you can see I've done like that for the tree, and I put a big trunk on it. And then I realized that in her design, the tree is really in the background. It's not right in the foreground. So I decided to modify that trunk, make it a shorter trunk, and put it in its own little strip so that it's farther back in the field. And now we're going to try to turn this design into a quilt block. So I've laid it on my board so that I can see what size I've got. And each one of these strips turned out to be about 1.25 inches. And then this one is more like 3 inches. So what do we need to cut? If we want 1.25 inches in the finished size, we have to add a 1/2 inch for the seam allowance on this side of it and the seam allowance on this side of it. So every time you need a 1/2 inch more than what you want to see in the finished product. So 1.25 becomes 1 3/4 inches. So similarly, if this is 3 inches, what do we, or I forget now what it was, and I can't see it because I've got this on this side. Oh, I took the numbers off. That's clever. But you can see 1, 2, 2.5, or 3. So we're going to add. Oh, we're going to add a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut it 3 inches wide in order to get 2.5 inches visible in the finished tree.
I see how you're using that board. I had to buy one of those when I went to Wentworth for engineering. And I never even learned how to use it. Oh, thank you.
Well, you're going to see today quite a few ways that I've used it. I really like it. So the first thing I'm going to do is prepare this yard of fabric. And I wanted to show you again how I do it. So the first thing I do is iron the whole thing flat. And you can see I've got my spray bottle. By the way, in the senior center, we had a spray bottle that was designed for like garden use. And it was really huge, and it was too big for my hand. And I noticed that my hairdresser had one that fit a lady's hand perfectly. So I said, where did you get that? And I looked around for the hairdresser kind of spray bottle, and I like this kind much better. So anyway, I use a little of this if I need to. I never put water in my iron, because you may remember once in a while it'll spit and it spits brown spots onto your fabric, and I don't like that. So I always use my iron dry and a spray bottle if I need to dampen something.
Yeah, I can pay that.
Now I'm folding it in half lengthwise. So I'm putting the two selvage edges together, fold the fabric lengthwise. And before I press it, I'm going to look at the bottom, at the fold. And you can see that this fold is not neat. So what you do is you readjust
You don't have to pay it.
the selvages. You move the top one to the right or move it to the left to see if you can get it to straighten out. It should hang nice and flat like this.
Is that cotton material?
Yes, it's all cotton.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I know.
this looks like grass. So this is grass for
Yeah.
your design. Anyway, I've got it flat now. I've got the fibers lined up. And that's the purpose of this exercise. Get the fabric all lined up. And then I fold it again lengthwise. So these selvages now are against the bottom of that fold. And now I've got something that's about a foot wide. So I can manage this much more easily than you can manage a 40-inch wide piece of fabric. So I fold it twice and now I can cut it on my board and manage it easily. So here now I'm back on my board and I've lined that fold up against the bottom line here. So I know where the perpendicular is. I made a nice neat cut to neaten up the edge here. And then I'm coming in and measuring 3 inches wide. Okay, so these are the tools that help you cut things accurately.
Give me the money. I pay this.
Similarly, now we can cut pieces of sky, and I previously had prepared this fabric so that it's the same way. I'm cutting 1 3/4 inches
Oh, no. I
by
can do
the
it.
width of fabric. WOF in quilting means width of fabric. So I've got 44 inches wide,
Give you cash.
folded
But I gotta put it
in
my
4
check account to
thicknesses.
back up the check.
And so Claire, I'm going to mute you for a minute while you're talking. So 1 3/4 by the width of fabric. And now here's our base. We've got the grass and we have 4 strips of sky, the 3 that are 1 1/4 and 1 that's 3 inches. And we'll start assembling it. And I'm just trying out different fabrics. This one has some flowers already on it, so I thought I'd give it a try. And this is what I chose to be the tree. And I've cut pieces of tree fabric also to work in these spaces. So now we have to work out this angle. And angles are always interesting. But I'll show you a trick with the board. Whitney will appreciate this in a minute. So here I'm just trying out some possible flower colors. And you can see I chose a few things where I already have printed flowers on the fabric, so I might be able to utilize that.
Yeah,
Now,
I
what
have
about-
all those tools. I had to spend.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So you'll notice there are some diagonal lines on this board. See the little yellow lines that are running on those?
Mhm.
Those are specifically different angles. And so I sort of shopped around on the board to try to find an angle that was kind of like this, to see if I had something I could utilize. Because we've got an isosceles triangle basically going on. It's the same pitch on both sides, on every level. So if we can identify this pitch, we can use that consistently.
Mhm.
So what I found was this line is 60 degrees, and that was about the line that I wanted. So I cut this one on the 60-degree line using this on the board, and now I'm going to make the second cut. So from the 0 up this dotted line will take us 60 degrees.
Cool.
And the way you measure point to point, I'm going to pull it down to this mark before I actually cut it. So we'll start from 10. But I'm measuring from here to here to make a 5.5 inch wide at the bottom. and you notice as I'm doing this, I'm kind of winging the whole thing. I mean, I'm not worrying about it being precise at this point, but in each piece, there's something that needs to be precise. And here, what needs to be precise is this angle. So this angle is going to be the same on all our pieces, but this I may vary. I did wind up varying that. All right, and similarly, I'm going to cut the sky piece. I'm going to cut from here to here to get the 60-degree angle on the sky pieces. I'm not worrying so much about the length at this point. I'm just worrying about the angle. So now I have the 3 pieces ready to go together. All right, so you can see some of it is winging it and some of it is precise. So every time I look at something, I think, okay, what's truly important? What's the most important point I need to worry about? And at this point, I'm going to put it together and I'm going to worry about this line. This one I know is going to be wrong because this green piece is too wide. That's all right. But as long as I get these angles right, I'll be in good shape. Okay. So I'm going to put these 2 together and notice there's a notch here because I want to make sure that when I turn it, this edge will be continuous. Right? This edge is going to be continuous. And so we need a seam allowance, and that's my seam allowance, and I'm going to sew it right across like that. Okay. And now I'm sewing it, and you can see whatever the width is, it doesn't really matter, but it's this notch that I watch. I sew it from the notch and stay a consistent depth. Whether it's a 1/4 inch or a little bigger or a little smaller is not so important as long as there's a strong seam and is consistent. So here I have my continuous line across the bottom and I have too much on the top. That's easy. I'm going to trim that off like that. And again, now I'm using the board. In this case, I'm not worrying so much about the green part. I'm laying it flat. I'm using this ruler to make sure that I have a continuous line all the way. It doesn't angle. Okay. And I'll just trim that baby off. All right. So similarly, I'm going to do the same thing at the peak. But now, what's the most critical thing that I need to worry about and when I'm putting this together?
The peak.
The peak, exactly. So we're going to worry about the peak. We're not going to worry about this edge this time at all. We're going to worry about the peak. So first thing I do is sew that first seam and notice that they're together. I don't have an overhang here. I don't need it. I just need to make sure that this comes together. And I'm going to iron it flat because the next seam is going to go here, is going to go on top of this seam. So I need it all to be nice and flat. In this case, I ironed it toward the sky color. Usually I iron it toward the dark, but here, because I'm going to have another seam on top, I wanted to reduce the bulk. Here, if I had sewn it the other way, so figure if this seam allowance were folded this way, then my next seam is going to put too many layers of fabric on top of one another. So I'm going to simplify that a little bit. Okay, so now I attach the second sky piece, and again, we're worrying about the peak. We've got a 1/4 inch or so from this edge and from this edge, and I want to make sure that it crosses at a point where when I make the next seam, it's going to be right through that joint like that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So here we have our seam. And this is my seam allowance, so it's going to be right at the tippy top of that panel. And now I get to assemble it. It's beginning to look like something. So now I'm going to put it together. So again, what's the most important consideration when we're putting this together?
Well, I'm thinking about that seam. You want to fold that underneath so that you look the bottom of the triangle. Your isosceles triangle has got a nice even edge.
Actually, the most important thing here is going to be to align these tree parts.
Oh,
Okay, so we want to align them right down the middle. And in order to do that, I'm gonna mark them. So now I take each piece and use my ruler and make a mark. I've got a white pencil that I use to make the mark here, so that I can see it when I go to put those pieces together. And now I can see these places where I've made the marks, and I'm going to put them together as I assemble my tree.
mm.
Now, I made a mistake on this, and I wanted to show you. Do you find my mistake?
Well,
here.
that right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this seam allowance got flipped back the wrong way when I was sewing it together. And I wanted to show you what to do about that, because it happens to all of us.
Great.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do is just snip with my seam rippers, not a scissors. You use your seam ripper, because you
Right.
don't want to cut your fabric. You just want to cut the little thread. And I'll use my seam ripper to just cut that thread and pull back enough threads that I can flip it the right way. And then I sewed from here to here. So now I've got a nice straight, strong seam, and I've got my selvage going in the right direction.
Ants look good too.
And there it is.
All
We have a
right.
tree. Okay, and you notice this is all ragged because I just decided, remember, this was the important thing to worry about. The rest of it is just, we'll worry about it later. But when you're putting something together, figure what's your critical match point is one of the things that I learned to look for. Look for that critical match point. So here I've got the trunk aligned, centered right under my lovely marks.
Wow.
So here we're back on the board, and again, I'm centering. I've got a center. I've got one line centered right on my tree, so that I can make it square it up. And I'm squaring it to 11 inches. We actually want 10.5 inches square, but I leave it a little bit generous until I get a little farther in the process. But I wanted to get my field, before I start putting flowers on it, I want to know where the edges are of this. So this raggedy edge has got to go. So I've trimmed it back to 11 inches wide. And it's still a little bit too tall and a little bit too wide, but that's all right. As long as I keep in mind that I need to stay inside of 3/4 inches when I'm putting my flowers on. So I have to keep that in mind. And now we'll start thinking about flowers. So what do we want for flowers? Trying out some fabrics. And here's the tool that I'm going to use for this. This is called Steam-A-Seam 2. It's basically double stick tape for fabric. Okay, it's called a fusible web. You can see double stick light fusible web. So the light part is because even with the web, when you put so many things together, it stays soft and supple like fabric. It doesn't become stiff. The older ones become quite stiff. So basically, we're going to turn a piece of fabric into a sticker. Okay, And if you're just doing a wall hanging, this might be enough. But when we're doing something that's going to have to go through the wash, then I still need to stitch it down.
Mhm.
But at least it's going to hold it very nicely in place while we're doing our stitching.
Mhm.
And whenever you use something new like this, be sure to read all the directions before you start. Don't just read step one, but read the whole thing. So in this case, we're going to stick the seam and steam to the wrong side of the material. And if it won't stick, warm your fabric with your iron before you applying the web. And it calls for a steam iron, you may notice, and I told you I don't put water in my iron. But again, you can just lightly mist it with a little water if you want the mist. Then after we've done that, then we're going to cut. Then we'll peel off the backing and we'll press it finish down. So there are two layers to this. When you pull out a sheet of it, one side of it feels like wax paper and the other side feels sort of rough. It's because it has this mesh on top of it that's made out of basically glue, fabric glue. And so you look for the rough side. That's the side with the glue on it. And we're going to take one sheet of that, which you can see the white part of here. That's the sheet of steam-a-seam. Looks like paper, but it's rough. Okay. And so lay out the fabric on the rough side. So the fabric is face up. So we're putting the glue on the back of it. Okay. So I've just sort of laid out chunks of the fabric I think I want to make flowers out of. Janet, go ahead.
Why don't you just use washable glue if you're going to be?
Well, you could, but you'll see as I go through here that it's I think much easier to use the fusible web. But yes, you can use glue.
I find that when I'm doing paper piecing, I have to glue certain spots or they get flipped, and so I'm trying to remember to bring washable glue when I'm doing that. Does that make sense?
I'm not picturing exactly what you're talking about, but with paper piecing, I almost never use glue. But this
Really?
is basic. This is the applique of the flowers
Yeah.
that we're working on right now.
Well, like that seam you had to open up and re-sew.
Yeah.
I would look at that before I sewed and maybe just put a dab of washable glue right there so it wouldn't flip.
I see.
You're saying you don't do that?
No, I don't do that. And when I'm doing a seam, when you're sewing a seam and there's a seam in there, you're going across another seam. You just have to watch which way it's going. And I use my seam ripper or some other stylist to help me just lay them out in the right direction before I sew them. That's one that slipped past me, but usually I get them right in the first place. Okay, so now we're going to stick them onto that paper. We've just been laying it out so far, and now we're going to actually stick it down. And the trick to this is you do not want to move your iron from side to side because you're going to move the fabric, right? So before you press it, you want to first protect your iron. And what I've done is I've taken some scraps and put them upside down so I can tell them apart really easily. I put them upside down just to fill those white spaces because I don't want to get the glue on my iron. Okay, so I filled any white spaces that I had left in my layout. Let me show you again. So here you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I've got some white spaces. The glue is sticking right up. It's going to stick right to my iron if I hit it with that iron. So I want to cover these up.
Yeah.
So I just covered them up with some scraps and I put them upside down so I could tell real easily that those were the throwaways.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's just simply to protect my iron. And then you sit the iron down and don't move it for 15, 20 seconds. Then you pick it up and you place it in another place, but you don't slide it. Don't slide your iron when you're doing this. And now we can start cutting it. Okay, so I've got the glue on the back. Basically, I'm cutting out stickers. And here I decided I wanted to draw what I wanted to do with the yellow. So I drew on the back of it. So the back of it, I told you, is like wax paper. It's more like freezer paper because you can draw on it. I did that with a pencil, and it's nice and bright. So I just drew it freehand with a pencil, and I'll use that as my yellow flowers. So you just cut around them like this. Okay. And now they're just little paper pieces, and I'm just scattering them on the tree design to see where I want to put them. And I can move them around pretty easily. So anyway, I'm just freely moving these around. They just slide around because there's just paper on the back, right? So there's nothing holding them. I'm just arranging them at will. And then once I get them the arrangement the way I want it, now I'm going to peel off the backing. So this is the wax paper part of the backing. This is the wax paper I'm taking off. And what I usually do is fold it. And then once I've got a fold in it, then usually I can get the fabric away from it more easily. So fold it, then just pull this guy off. And here you can see I've taken my little paper pieces off, and I've organized them the way I want. Now you can still pick them up and move them because they're not stuck down yet. But we've got them so that we can put them wherever we want them. Arrange it and rearrange it until we like it.
So basically what I did was like a pattern.
Yeah,
That's cute. I like it.
good, thanks. It's not exactly what you did, but it's in the spirit of it, right?
Well, the main thing is I did something.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Too many
Okay,
other
and now-
things going on.
Now I'm going to actually stick them down. And again, I'm putting my iron on it, let it sit nice and still for 15 to 20 seconds, and then pick it up and move it to a different spot and let it sit for 15, 20 seconds and pick it up until you're happy with it. Now we're going to worry about stitching it down. And on your machine, it'll have some assortment of stitches. And on this assortment, it could, what I want is either 11 or 12 or 22. They're all three of them have sort of the right configuration. These go to the right, these go to the left. But other than that, I want this kind of a stitch, this edge stitch, to go around each of these flowers. And I don't know quite how they're going to behave, right? Because it's not something that we would normally use for sewing. So I'm going to test it. So what I did was to test the candidates. I'd go like 10 stitches of one, and then I change to the other stitch. And I do 10 or 12 stitches of that one, and maybe adjust something. I tried a different stitch. That was a failure. Then I decided I need to just straighten out for a little bit. And then I did another one. See what I'm doing?
I like this one. The
Which
edge
one?
It looks like loops.
Yeah, this is the one I'm going to choose. I want it to be small. I want it to hold the edge, but I want it to be kind of not dominant in the design. I want it to complement, but not dominate. So I'm going to choose that one. And now what I've done is on a piece of test fabric, I took one of the patches I'm not using in the design, but I wanted to try doing it, both because I haven't done this in a long time, so I didn't know quite how it was going to behave. But I'm going to check the size of the stitch, and you can see I made some adjustments in the course of doing it. Here's it's too big, and so forth, trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, and also learning how to control it,
I made the pattern.
because you have to get used to
Yeah.
where am I, how's it doing,
Like that.
And if you have the ability on your machine to tell it to stop with the needle down, that's very handy when you're doing this kind of thing. If you stop with the needle down, then you can pick up the presser foot and change the angle of the way you're going much more easily.
I'm just gonna check
So
out-
this is my first sort of throwaway test piece. This is my test drive. It's not the finished product. This is not on the real fabric, but it is on a piece of similar fabric. And this is one of those patches that I had prepared. So the texture and the depth of it are the same as it will be in real life. So this is my test drive. Okay, and I always do a test drive because, you know, this is not something I do every day. I'm going to forget how to do it. I'm going to forget how it feels. Telling stitch 11 from stitch 12 is difficult. So always do a test drive.
It's
All right,
like
so
testing
here
the
it is.
baby's formula.
What?
I
When you
love the yellow
Testing the
one.
baby's formula.
That's right, testing a baby's formula. So
Look at
yeah,
that.
you can see I changed colors
Look at how
to
beautiful.
try to
it is.
complement
Yeah,
them.
with the flowers around it, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm. You change colors of the threads,
Yeah,
yeah.
I changed the color of the thread.
Wow.
put a little doodad in the middle.
Oh, Joyce,
this
it's
is what you call
amazing.
precious.
How'd
Oh,
you
I
do the
love
thing in
it.
the middle?
That's a stitch. It should be a circle, and mine is not a circle. I don't know why, but anyway.
It looks better like that.
Yeah, but it's sort of clever. It works. So
Yeah, it looks
anyway,
almost like a PNZ.
yeah. So anyway, that's how it came out, and I put it up with the others.
Oh,
And if there are enough little flowers around, I'll
See, it's right
I'll
there.
readjust them a little bit. But I think it's we're almost there.
It's very eye-catching,
Oh, yeah, good.
Yes.
Right there.
right there.
But
There it is.
Yours
I
is-
can't
They
see
need
it.
another one.
yeah, right
Oh,
here.
there it is. Ah, I got it. Here we are.
You need another
Oh.
pattern.
And here's more turkey in it. And here's some more decorations. Here's this bright one that Janet did.
Which one did I do?
It's
This
so
one.
different. I love it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh,
I didn't realize I had such talent.
Joyce, did you take off the chimney, the cockeyed chimney?
No, I didn't do anything with
No.
your chimney yet, but I was thinking about it. I might do it this way.
Oh,
There
I
we go.
love that. It's so different.
I thought I did two houses, two cockeyed chimneys.
Yes, you did do two cockeyed chimneys, and I forget now where the other one is.
Oh, so do I.
Let's see. It's up here somewhere because they're all there.
They kept
But
telling me.
there's one
Download
a chimney, and where's your? Oh, this one must be this one. It's just a little out of sight here.
You download the Zoom.
Yeah, it's this one with its corner turned back. Here's your other one. Oh, this one looks fine. This one had
Down
a
here.
couple of other issues. I think I will adjust that one a little bit. But anyway, so I think it's going to be great. We're getting it.
Yay!
it looks good.
Yay!
Pat on the back, pat on the back.
Yay
Right.
for the whole class.
Yeah,
So-
I wanted to add flowers or bushes to some of those plainer houses. And when you showed us how to do like the appliques at that time, I just didn't like it. But what you showed us today with ironing it on that, wax,
Yeah.
it's something for next time.
That's right. That's
Looks good.
good. Yeah. I think
Good job, Joyce.
We're lucky we have Joyce in our lives.
Very much
So
so.
talented.
Kudos, Joyce. You do a great teaching job too.
Thank you.
Merchandise.
It took me about 2 hours. No, more like 3 hours to make that block. Took a good hour just to do the piecing. And then the rest of it was going around all those flowers. So